Ebony Caldwell never expected her day to unravel under the glaring lights of law enforcement, pinned beneath the weight of a racist assumption. A simple outing became a nightmare when a prejudiced cop accused her, an accomplished, elegant black woman, of theft in front of an entire crowd at New York's iconic Waldorf Astoria hotel. Little did that officer know Ebony was not only innocent, she was also the beloved wife of billionaire entrepreneur Richard Caldwell. In this whirlwind tale of heartbreak, injustice, and powerful retribution, watch as Ebony and Richard fight back against systemic prejudice. Their journey tests every limit and unveils shocking secrets, ensuring no one remains the same again. Ebony Caldwell was born in Detroit, Michigan, where she learned from a tender age that perseverance was the key to survival. She remembered vividly the cramped apartment on the east side where she lived with her mother and grandmother. The corridor walls were stained with old water damage, the cracked floors squeaked at night, and every morning she arose to the melodies of car horns and neighbors' squabbles. Somehow through it all, Ebony discovered happiness, in her mother's unwavering love, in the warm hush of her grandmother's bedtime stories, and in the unwavering sense that she was destined for something extraordinary. She was a dreamer, scribbling pictures of futuristic towers in her notebook at school, and planning out entire landscapes of possibility in her imagination. That optimism carried her through, even when times were tough, even when her family struggled to make ends meet. She grew to embrace adversity, transforming challenges into stepping stones. By the time Ebony finished high school, she had become a youth advocate in her neighborhood, someone who volunteered to tutor younger children and raise money for local community projects. Her drive was unstoppable, and it was that same drive that propelled her into a scholarship at Howard University, one of the most prestigious historically black colleges in the country. Life at Howard provided Ebony with a mosaic of culture, pride, and countless possibilities. She blossomed in classes of political science, community organization, and African American studies. She found empowerment in the stories of leaders who had battled racism and institutional inequality. The campus was a sanctuary of knowledge and resilience that kindled her determination to excel. Upon graduation, Ebony navigated the corporate world, forging opportunities in high-level positions where she championed diversity and fair representation. It was at an annual charity gala in Washington, D.C., benefiting underprivileged children, that she first met Richard Caldwell, a charismatic entrepreneur, 10 years her senior. Ebony remembered the glow in his hazel eyes as he approached her, offering a confident handshake and a playful smile. Something in his gaze suggested a man whose life had not always been easy. However, he carried himself with a suave, quiet dignity that captured Ebony's attention from the first moment they spoke. Richard Caldwell was a self-made billionaire, the founder of a global tech enterprise called Caltech Innovations, which specialized in green energy solutions. His empire stretched across continents, but at his core, he remained humble. Born in a modest household in upstate New York, Richard had coded his first computer program at 14 using a second-hand laptop. His father, a mechanic, instilled in him the importance of grit and perseverance. He carried those lessons forward, forging a company that would eventually change the world's approach to energy consumption. At that gala, Ebony and Richard discovered that they shared a passion for uplifting marginalized communities. He listened intently as she described her volunteer efforts in Detroit, her commitment to youth mentorship, and her desire to see more diversity in tech. She, in turn, admired his focus on philanthropic endeavors, such as donating solar panels to villages in sub-Saharan Africa. Their connection was electric, fused by a mutual sense of purpose. Romance followed swiftly. Over the next year, Ebony found herself invited to philanthropic events, high-profile dinners, and private circles she never knew existed. Richard's confidence in every room, whether it be a board meeting in Manhattan or a dinner with the Clintons, never overshadowed Ebony's presence. Instead, he lifted her voice and respected her insight, introducing her as an astounding leader with a vision for justice. After a whirlwind courtship of laughter, travel, and deep conversations, they married in a small ceremony in Paris, with only the city's twinkling lights and a few close friends bearing witness. Their union was more than just marriage. It was a partnership built on love, respect, and the unwavering belief that they could change the world for the better. Fast forward 3 years. Ebony and Richard Caldwell were now established both in their careers and as a couple. They split time between their penthouse suite in Manhattan and a sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Yet Ebony never strayed far from her philanthropic roots. She led seminars on racial equity, funded scholarships for young Black entrepreneurs, and supported neighborhood revitalization projects in Detroit. On a crisp Sunday morning, Ebony was in Manhattan for a charity luncheon. She recalled a memory. As a child, she dreamed of stepping out of one of those glossy cars on Park Avenue, wearing polished shoes and a coat that spoke of elegance. Now she could afford that dream 10 times over, yet materialism never replaced her humility. She did, however, enjoy the freedom to move through the city comfortably, an achievement she refused to feel guilty about. After all, she had earned it. She arrived at the Waldorf Astoria that morning, wearing a sleek black dress and an understated diamond necklace. Richard's anniversary gift from the previous year. The event was a fundraiser for a new youth tech center in the Bronx, something that resonated with both Ebony and Richard's philanthropic interests. Her husband was supposed to join her, but an urgent meeting about a business acquisition delayed him. He promised he'd come as soon as he could, urging her to proceed without him. The fundraiser was lively, filled with well-dressed donors clinking champagne glasses and discussing the future of technology in underserved communities. Ebony mingled with old acquaintances, from local politicians to entrepreneurs, all of whom knew Ebony to be a gracious and inspirational figure. She was in the middle of a conversation with a city council member when she felt the buzz of her phone in her purse. It was a text from Richard. "Meeting running long. We'll meet you in the lobby at 2 p.m. Ebony sighed, a bit disappointed but understanding. She typed a quick message back and then gently excused herself to a quieter corner of the ballroom. By 1:45 p.m., she decided to slip out a bit early and head to the lobby to wait for Richard. Perhaps she'd pick up a small gift for him from the in-house shops along the way. There was a particular men's accessory boutique he loved, Johnson & Brooks, known for elegant cufflinks. Ebony thought it would be a sweet, spontaneous gesture to surprise him with something special. She navigated the opulent corridors of the Waldorf, passing intricate chandeliers and plush carpets that made each step silent. Upon reaching the boutique, she casually browsed the glass display cases. A set of platinum cufflinks with a subtle wave design caught her eye, reminding her of Richard's passion for sailing. She asked the shop assistant, a polite older gentleman, if she could see them. He laid them carefully on the counter, allowing Ebony to admire their craftsmanship up close. In that moment, Ebony heard the distinct squeak of dress shoes on the polished floor behind her. Instinctively, she glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of a uniformed police officer. At first, she paid him no mind. It wasn't unusual for law enforcement to stroll the halls of such a high-profile venue. She turned her attention back to the cufflinks, asking the assistant about pricing and possible engraving options. Suddenly, the officer cleared his throat loudly. Ebony looked up. His face was stern, his stare fixated on her with a tension that made the air still. She offered him a polite nod. The shop assistant also noticed the officer's presence and seemed momentarily flustered, not sure what to do. "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice low but firm, "I need to see what you have in your hands." A mild confusion crossed Ebony's face. She held the cufflinks, displayed on a velvet pad, resting on the counter. "These?" she asked, her tone calm and polite. Let me see your purse," the officer demanded, gaze narrowing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scowl that seemed etched into his features. Ebony felt her heart thud. She glanced at the shop assistant, who looked worried but said nothing. She turned back to the officer, her eyes unwavering. "Excuse me, may I ask what this is about?" He bristled, as though even her question was an affront. "I received a report about suspicious activity in the store," he said, crossing his arms over his chest. "I'd like to see your purse now." Ebony's mind reeled. Suspicious activity? Her. She had done nothing but politely inquire about an item for purchase. Slowly, she clasped her purse shut. Her heart pounded with a mix of indignation and vulnerability. She had encountered racism before, but something about this moment felt dangerously charged. Still, Ebony knew her rights. She also knew that refusing might escalate matters. She gently placed the purse on the counter, carefully opening it to show her wallet, phone, and a folded invitation from that morning's charity event. "Is there something you think I stole?" she asked calmly, trying to maintain her composure and not let her voice tremble with anger. His gaze swept inside her purse before flicking back to her face. "We had a complaint about a shoplifter matching your description," he said briskly. "I'll need you to come with me for questioning." The shop assistant spoke up at last, voice quivering. "Officer, there must be a misunderstanding. Ms. Caldwell is a customer here. She hasn't stolen anything." "Stay out of this," the officer snapped, never taking his eyes off Ebony. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the counter." Confusion and embarrassment warred in Ebony's mind. She could feel the heat of stares from other shoppers, the creeping humiliation flooding her cheeks. She took a deep breath, reminded herself that she was Ebony Caldwell. No one had the right to treat her like a criminal without cause. "Officer, my name is Ebony Caldwell," she said, her voice measured but resolute. "I'm actually in the middle of purchasing these cufflinks. Check with the store's security camera if you like. I have done nothing wrong." He scoffed. "I've heard it all before. Let's go. You can explain yourself down at the station." Her pulse raced. She could sense the racial bias crackling in the air, like an electrical storm. This wasn't a routine check. The officer's hostility spoke volumes. She realized that compliance might spare her further public shame, but also recognized she was under no legal obligation to follow him without probable cause. Ebony tried one last time to reason. "Officer, you are mistaken. You haven't asked for identification. You haven't provided any real reason for suspecting me of theft aside from my description. I'm a guest at this hotel, attending a charity event. I insist that you contact the hotel security and verify my presence at the luncheon." He stepped closer, now only a foot away. She could smell the cologne on his uniform, and a flicker of something dark in his eyes made her uneasy. "I won't ask again," he said, his hand hovering near his holster. "You're resisting a lawful request." That word, resisting, ignited alarm bells in Ebony's mind. She had read too many headlines about resisting arrest, leading to tragedy for Black individuals. Her breath quickened. If she resisted, no matter how politely, this could spiral. The shop assistant tried to intervene once more, but the officer shot him a glare that kept his mouth clamped shut. Ebony saw no immediate way out. Her phone was in her purse. She could call Richard or her lawyer, but not before this officer potentially escalated the situation. With trembling hands and tears threatening to blur her vision, Ebony nodded softly. She turned to the shop assistant with an apologetic smile. "I'll be right back," she whispered, hoping the man would alert someone else, maybe hotel security, or even call Richard's team. With that, Ebony Caldwell found herself led out of the store by a racist cop who was hell-bent on proving her guilt in a crime she never committed. Ebony was escorted down a side corridor normally used by hotel staff. Her heart pounded as she prayed for Richard's timely arrival. The officer radioed for backup, reporting a shoplifting suspect in custody. Ebony winced at the word custody. She was forced to lean against a wall as the officer patted her down. The humiliating procedure drew stares from housekeeping staff who passed by with carts of fresh linens. Each turned glance was like a dagger. Ebony, a philanthropic leader and entrepreneur in her own right, was being treated like a common criminal, all because of this man's prejudice. As the pat-down concluded, Ebony felt an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, her dignity battered. She had done everything right. She dressed conservatively, she spoke politely, she cooperated in showing her belongings. Yet here she was, forced against the wall, her arms and legs subjected to a stranger's invasive search. She couldn't help but feel the centuries-old weight of racial injustice. How many times had innocent Black men and women endured this? Powerless in the face of a system that so often viewed them with suspicion. When he finished, he tugged at her elbow. "We're going to wait for a second officer, and then we'll transport you to the station," he said in a monotone, as though reading from a script. Ebony exhaled, trying to steady her nerves. She could at least attempt to call Richard. "Do you mind if I use my phone to call my attorney?" Ebony asked, her voice trembling but resolute. The officer snorted. "Attorney? Let's not pretend we need all that. You're caught red-handed. Why don't you just do yourself a favor and confess? Caught red-handed? Ebony felt her anger flare. She had never touched or concealed anything beyond the cufflinks set that was on the store's counter. She forced her breathing to remain calm. I'm exercising my right to call legal counsel, she repeated, reaching into her purse. Without warning, the officer snatched her purse away. You can call your attorney from the station, he barked, ignoring her rights. Before she could protest further, another officer arrived, a shorter, stocky man with a weary expression. He peered at Ebony, then at the first cop, evidently picking up on tension in the air. What's going on? He asked. Found our shoplifter, the first officer replied. We'll book her at the precinct. Hang on, the second officer said, glancing at Ebony's attire and the gracious dignity in her posture. He seemed more reluctant to jump to conclusions. Ma'am, I'm Officer Daniels. Do you have any ID on you? Finally, someone who was at least asking the basic question. Ebony nodded. Yes, I do. It's in my wallet, right there in the purse he took, she said, pointing. She shot the first officer a challenging look, anger simmering in her eyes. Officer Daniels retrieved her purse and pulled out the wallet. Ebony Caldwell, he read, scanning the ID. He raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly happened? She recounted the short saga from the store, how she was about to purchase a gift for her husband, how the first officer came in and demanded she follow him without any legitimate reason. I'm at a fundraising luncheon for the Bronx Tech Center, Ebony added. The event is nearly over, so I stepped out to shop while waiting for my husband. You can check with the front desk or the event organizers. They'll confirm I've been a guest here all morning. Officer Daniels looked uncertain, turning his attention to his colleague. Did we get a call about a shoplifter matching her description? The first officer stiffened, clearly irritated by the question. Manager reported a black woman wearing a black dress acting suspicious around the jewelry counter. This is a black woman in a black dress, he stated as though that was proof enough. Ebony felt a hot flush crawl up her neck. The notion that being black in a black dress was the entirety of the reasoning made her both enraged and sorrowful. She locked eyes with Officer Daniels. I believe I'm being profiled, she said plainly, refusing to mince words. For a moment, no one spoke. Then in the distance came a series of quick footsteps. Richard Caldwell appeared, flanked by two of his private security team members. His presence in that corridor was like a sudden burst of authority. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, hair neatly combed, Richard's eyes fell upon Ebony with immediate concern. He quickened his pace. What the hell is going on? He demanded, voice trembling in controlled fury. He reached Ebony and placed a protective arm around her. Officer, why are you detaining my wife? The change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. The first officer stepped back, as if confronted with a reality he hadn't anticipated. Officer Daniels began to explain the situation, stumbling over words, clearly realizing that this woman's husband was not someone easily dismissed. She was suspected of shoplifting, the first officer cut in, regaining his bravado now that a show of confidence was needed. We got a call from the store manager. Oh, really? Richard's nostrils flared, his face a mask of cold anger. So you forced her into a corridor, patted her down without probable cause, and refused her the right to call her attorney, all based on a suspicion? The second officer exhaled. Sir, we're just following up on a report. The manager said the suspect was wearing similar clothing. Richard's expression turned incredulous. Did you confirm with the store manager if Ebony was actually the suspect? Did you check the security cameras? Did you do anything besides assume that because my wife is black, she must be the culprit? Silence. The hallway was thick with tension. Ebony, now gripping Richard's hand, felt tears pooling, not merely from the humiliation, but from the relief that he'd arrived. She squeezed his hand gratefully, and he pulled her closer in a comforting gesture. Finally, the second officer, Officer Daniels, spoke in a measured tone. Sir, we can clear this up if we go to the store manager together. If there's been a misunderstanding, we can resolve it right now. The first officer, outraged at being challenged, started to protest. That's not how... Richard cut him off. That's exactly how this is going to happen. Unless you want my lawyers, my media representatives, and the entire PR department of Caltech Innovations breathing down your department's neck for unlawful detainment and racial profiling. His voice was low, cold, lethal in its promise of repercussions. Officer Daniels nodded hastily, ignoring the searing glare of his colleague. Understood, sir. Let's go. Escorted by Richard, Ebony, and the two officers, the corridor led them back to the men's accessory boutique, Johnson and Brooks. A small crowd had gathered, staff and guests whispering nervously, their gazes darting from Ebony to the officers. The manager, a young woman named Laura, stepped forward, face tense. "Ma'am, sir." Her voice shook slightly. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. Officer Royce here," she indicated the first cop, came in and said he was responding to a call about a woman matching Ms. Caldwell's description. I told him there must be some misunderstanding, that Ms. Caldwell didn't take anything. I never thought he would." She trailed off, glancing uneasily at Ebony. It was clear the store had not actually pressed charges or even made a formal complaint. They'd simply reported to the front desk that a suspicious character was seen near the jewelry items, describing a woman with a different hairstyle and a completely different bag. Ebony's presence at the store, ironically, might have overlapped in the officer's mind with that incomplete tip-off. Richard's stare was sharp enough to cut glass. "Did you see my wife take anything, Ms. Laura?" No, sir," the manager stammered. "She was looking at cufflinks, which she asked to see openly. She never touched anything else. We have cameras, it's all on film." I tried to explain that to the officer, but he didn't listen. He insisted Ms. Caldwell was the suspect. Officer Daniels sighed, pulling aside his racist colleague. Their hushed argument was audible in fragments. "We messed up big time, and her ID says Caldwell, recognized philanthropic figure, and what were you thinking?" Ebony stood close to Richard, still recovering from the shock. The store manager turned to Ebony, hands clasped in front of her. "I'm very sorry. We never intended for you to be treated this way. If there's anything at all we can do, our store policy is always to treat customers with dignity and respect." Ebony's voice was still raw with humiliation. "I appreciate your apology," she managed, "but next time, don't call the police just because someone in your store looks suspicious. That's how innocent people get hurt." Laura nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes, ma'am. You're absolutely right." Officer Daniels returned, wearing a grim expression. "Ms. Caldwell, Mr. Caldwell, we sincerely apologize. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." Richard gave a mirthless laugh. "A misunderstanding? You mean blatant racial profiling?" Officer Daniels looked genuinely remorseful. "We're going to let you go, of course, and we'll file a report stating no theft occurred." Ebony felt her composure slip. "Let me go? You never had legitimate grounds to detain me in the first place. And that man," she pointed at the first officer, "violated my rights. Are you telling me you're letting him walk away with no repercussions?" Officer Royce bristled, crossing his arms defensively, his eyes darting from Ebony to Richard and back again. The flicker of arrogance in his stare had diminished but not disappeared. He seemed to cling to the notion that in his mind, Ebony was still somehow in the wrong. "We can discuss that at the station," Officer Daniels offered. "Ma'am, I'm truly sorry." Richard's palm rested on Ebony's shoulder. "We'll be pressing charges," he said firmly, voice unwavering. "Unlawful detainment, racial discrimination, whatever our legal team advises. My wife was humiliated, threatened, and manhandled because of this man's prejudice." The words hung heavy in the air. Officer Royce's face blanched at the mention of official charges. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Ebony watched him struggle, that earlier bravado now replaced by panic. "Sir, I was only doing my job," he tried lamely, but his eyes were unsteady. "Your job," Ebony echoed, voice trembling. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass innocent people. You never even asked for my ID before forcing me down a corridor. You snatched my phone away when I asked to call a lawyer. That's not your job. That's abuse of power." Richard's jaw tightened. He guided Ebony away from the scene. "Come on, love," he said. "Let's call our team and get you home." The crowd parted to let them pass. Some onlookers wore expressions of sympathy and regret, while others gawked in fascination at the spectacle. Ebony kept her head high, though her heart felt heavy. This was supposed to have been a simple day. Attend a charity event, buy Richard a thoughtful gift. Instead, it had become a heart-wrenching demonstration of how deeply racism could still sink its claws into daily life. The drive back to their penthouse in Manhattan felt surreal. Ebony stared out the tinted window of their limousine, her reflection melding with the cityscape. She saw the lines of weariness around her eyes. In her mind, she replayed each humiliating moment. She felt anger at the cop, at the system that enabled him, and at the store for their knee-jerk reaction. But she also felt a seething frustration at how powerless she had felt. This from a woman who had worked her entire life to gain a measure of respect and security. Even her wealth, her status, her philanthropic work didn't shield her from prejudice. Richard sat beside her, silent for a long time. Then he reached out, gently took her hand, and pressed a soft kiss against her knuckles. "I'm sorry, Ebony," he whispered, sounding pained. "I wish I'd gotten there sooner." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for stepping in when you did," she said, her voice shaky. "It's not your fault. It just happened." Richard's eyes narrowed. "But it shouldn't have. You deserve better." His anger was evident in every tight muscle, every labored breath. She knew he felt he had failed her, not being there to protect her. The notion made her heart ache. Ebony was a capable woman, but sometimes even the strongest individuals need allies. "We can't let this go," Richard said at last, voicing what Ebony had been thinking. "It's not just about us. If this can happen to you in broad daylight at the Waldorf Astoria, it can happen to anyone. Hell, it does happen to people all the time, without the resources we have." Ebony nodded. "I'm with you, but let's handle this carefully. I don't want to become a spectacle on social media. I want to make sure whatever action we take sets a precedent against such behavior." Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "It's my attorney," he said, stepping out of the conversation to answer the call. Ebony leaned back against the plush seat, letting a deep sigh escape her lips. The city skyline blurred outside, and her reflection stared back at her, wearing an expression of both steel and sadness. She whispered a silent prayer for anyone who didn't have a billionaire spouse to come to their rescue. Over the next week, Ebony's life took a dramatic turn. She and Richard decided to file an official complaint with the police department's Internal Affairs Division, accusing Officer Royce of racial profiling, unlawful detainment, and excessive force. News outlets picked up the story, especially once they realized Ebony Caldwell was involved, a well-known philanthropist married to one of the country's most successful entrepreneurs. Journalists besieged Ebony with interview requests. She declined most, electing to release a formal statement through her spokesperson. In it, she emphasized that this incident wasn't just about her, but a reflection of systemic racism that too many people endure. The statement closed with a call for meaningful reform and accountability in policing practices. Meanwhile, the NYPD found itself under scrutiny. Public outrage, fueled by Ebony and Richard's high profile, put pressure on the department to act quickly. The police commissioner, bombarded with media questions, announced that Officer Royce would be suspended pending an investigation. Yet Ebony wasn't satisfied with mere suspension. Through her legal team, she sought a civil rights lawsuit against the city, citing the emotional distress and violation of her constitutional rights. She wanted the lawsuit to be a springboard for broader policy changes, mandatory bias training, body cameras that officers couldn't deactivate at will, and clear disciplinary measures for racial profiling. Late one afternoon, Ebony sat in her home office, scanning updates on social media. Support poured in from various corners: family, friends, activists, even celebrities who lauded her courage to speak up. Yet she also saw hateful remarks, bigoted comments from anonymous trolls, questioning her motives, insulting her race, or calling her a liar. Each barbed word left a bruise on her spirit. She forced herself to close the laptop and walk away, refusing to let ignorance hijack her emotional health. Richard found her looking out over the city skyline, eyes distant. He slipped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "The lawsuit's gaining traction," he whispered. "The city's going to offer a settlement, probably a large one, but our lawyers say we should push for an explicit policy reform in the settlement terms." That's what I want, Ebony replied firmly. If we accept just money, it'll be brushed aside as another hush payment. I want tangible changes. This can't keep happening. He held her a bit tighter. I'm proud of you, he said. You're turning a painful situation into an opportunity for progress. That's leadership. She leaned back against him, her eyelids fluttering closed. In that quiet moment, Ebony allowed herself to feel the heartbreak of what had happened. But she also felt the unyielding core of her spirit, which refused to let injustice win. Meanwhile, Officer Royce found himself under a dark cloud of scrutiny. The suspension stripped him of his badge and gun, leaving him in a precarious position. Media outlets dug into his past, unearthing prior complaints from citizens who alleged racial profiling or aggressive behavior during traffic stops. Most had been swept under the rug or settled quietly. But now, with Ebony Caldwell's case shining a light, these old incidents bubbled to the surface. In a small, cluttered apartment on the outskirts of Brooklyn, Royce paced. He had refused to go to the grocery store, the bar, or even to pick up his kids from school. The glare of cameras and the condemnation from the department were too much to bear. His wife, after days of fighting about the negative attention, had taken their children to her mother's house. He was alone, stewing in rage and humiliation. His phone buzzed with messages of condemnation. Old friends turned distant, uncertain whether associating with Royce might damage their own reputations. A few extremist supporters cheered him on, urging him not to cave to political correctness, but their online presence was overshadowed by the tidal wave of condemnation. The department, seeing him as a liability, released a statement indicating they would cooperate fully with the investigation and ensure justice is served. Royce took to drinking cheap whiskey at night, glaring at the TV screen whenever Ebony Caldwell's face appeared on the news. He sneered at her refined manner, her calm, measured words about the need for police reform. He cursed her wealth, her powerful husband, and the very idea that he could be publicly punished for doing what he considered standard policing. In his bitterness, he refused to see the truth of his own wrongdoing. But as the days wore on, fear sank its teeth into Royce's heart. He realized that Ebony Caldwell was more than just a random wealthy woman. She was connected, beloved, and now she had the public's empathy. He knew he was fighting not just her, but an entire wave of national anger over systemic racism. Desperately, he scrambled for a defense, claiming Ebony had been acting suspiciously, that she had refused to cooperate. But the security footage from the boutique told a starkly different story. She had been calm, cooperative, even civil in the face of his aggression. And so, with every passing day, Royce's world unraveled. The city threatened to terminate him if the internal affairs investigation confirmed racial bias. His fellow officers, not wanting to be tainted by association, quietly distanced themselves. His finances strained under mounting legal fees. Worst of all, his wife threatened divorce if he didn't find a way to fix the situation. "I'm not raising our kids in this mess," she told him coldly. "You brought this on yourself." Several weeks later, Ebony stood outside City Hall, dressed in a muted gray skirt suit. Reporters crowded the steps. She was set to attend a hearing with the police commissioner to discuss policy changes, hoping to leverage her lawsuit's momentum. By her side stood Richard, ever her stalwart support, in a team of legal advisors. She stepped to a podium, cameras clicking, the hum of voices ceasing as she prepared to speak. "What happened to me is not an isolated incident," she said, voice steady. "It's a symptom of a policing culture that sometimes sees black bodies as suspicious by default. We must demand accountability. We must demand better training, stricter oversight, and transparency in how complaints are handled." Her words rang across the crowd. She ended with a vow to continue pushing until meaningful changes were enacted. As she stepped away, a throng of supporters cheered. That evening, Ebony and Richard retreated to their penthouse, emotionally spent. They shared a glass of wine and gazed at the city lights. The swirling tension of lawsuits, media attention, and activism had weighed on both of them. Their philanthropic and business responsibilities hadn't diminished. If anything, they had to juggle more. And yet Ebony felt a sense of purpose. For the first time since the humiliating encounter, she found solace in the knowledge that her experiences might catalyze real change. Halfway through dinner, Ebony's phone rang. the name flashing on the screen. New York District Attorney's Office. She picked up, exchanging quick greetings. Her eyes widened at what she heard on the other end. By the time she hung up, her heart was pounding. "What is it?" Richard asked, setting down his fork. She swallowed hard. "Officer Royce has requested a meeting. He wants to apologize in person and discuss a settlement." Richard frowned. An apology? After all this time? Why the sudden change of heart? "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe the weight of the investigation is pushing him. Our legal team said they can arrange a private meeting if we choose." Richard reached across the table, taking her hand. "Whatever you decide, but remember you owe him nothing. Not forgiveness, not acceptance." Ebony nodded, her thoughts a storm of conflicted emotions. "I want to hear him out," she admitted. "Not because I want to comfort him, but because I need to see if this is genuine or just another tactic to save himself. If there's any chance he's actually ready to take responsibility, maybe we can use it to push for more reforms." Reluctantly, Richard agreed. They scheduled a meeting in a neutral conference room at the district attorney's office for the following week. Ebony tried to steel herself for whatever lay ahead. When Ebony arrived at the DA's office, she found a small, plain room prepared for the meeting. The fluorescent lights gave off a sterile glow, highlighting the glossy wooden table at the center. 2 chairs sat on one side, one for Ebony, one for her attorney, and across from them an empty chair for Royce. A representative from the DA's office hovered by the door, ready to supervise. Royce slipped into the room a few minutes late, wearing civilian clothing that looked rumpled and ill-fitting. Gone was the bravado of the uniform, the sneer of authority. His eyes flickered with fear, guilt, maybe regret. Ebony couldn't tell which. She offered him no greeting, simply folded her hands on the table, forcing her expression to remain neutral. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he began, voice subdued. Ebony didn't respond, letting him squirm in the silence. Finally, he lowered his eyes and continued. I messed up. I allowed my biases to get the better of me. I saw you in that store and I thought, well, I thought you were up to no good. It wasn't right, and I'm sorry." In the quiet that followed, Ebony studied him. His apology sounded rehearsed, like a child reciting lines for a school play. Still, she acknowledged that he had said the words, "I'm sorry," which was more than he had done before. She glanced at her attorney, who gave a slight nod, encouraging Ebony to respond. "I appreciate you meeting me," Ebony said carefully, "but you need to understand what you put me through. You humiliated me, physically searched me without cause, violated my rights, and threatened me. This wasn't a small mistake. It was a profound abuse of your power. And the worst part is that I'm not the first person you've done this to, am I?" Royce swallowed, glancing at the table. I don't know what to say." Ebony's attorney stepped in. "Officer Royce, you have a track record of complaints alleging racial bias. Ms. Caldwell is prepared to testify publicly about your misconduct. The civil suit against you personally and the department is strong. So you need to be clear about why you're here and what you're offering." Royce exhaled shakily. I'm here because I'd like to settle. I don't want this to go to trial. My lawyer says it'll ruin me, that I'll lose everything. I already lost my job. My wife is filing for divorce, all because of—" He caught himself, as though he were about to say, "because of you," but realized that would only inflame the situation. Instead, he bowed his head. "I've got nothing left. I'm sorry, Ms. Caldwell. I truly am. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to tell you face to face that I wish I could take it back." Ebony regarded him for a long moment. She saw a broken man, undone by his own prejudice and arrogance. Was it genuine remorse or merely desperation to salvage his life? Perhaps it was both. She sighed inwardly, feeling a pinch of pity, but pity wouldn't rectify the broader issues. "Thank you for apologizing," she said at last, voice steady. "I believe in accountability. We're still proceeding with the lawsuit because it's not just about me, but about preventing future abuses. If you truly want to make amends, you could consider publicly acknowledging your misconduct and advocating for better training against racial bias." Royce nodded, expression bleak. I'll do whatever it takes." Ebony's attorney placed a document on the table. "Officer Royce, This outlines an agreement we're prepared to consider. It includes a formal, written acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a commitment to participate in public service announcements on bias, and a willingness to cooperate with the city's new training initiative. In exchange, we might reduce the damages sought against you personally. However, the suit against the department stands. Royce's trembling fingers took the paper. He skimmed it, then nodded, tears brimming. Ebony watched him, a swirl of emotions churning within her. This was a man undone by the system he once personified, paying the price for bigotry he'd never bothered to question. She wondered if he'd ever truly change his heart. One thing was certain. Ebony refused to be the victim in this narrative. She was reclaiming her power, ensuring that the racism she endured might pave the way for systemic change. Whether Royce would become a cautionary tale or a reformed advocate remained to be seen. As the weeks went by, Officer Royce signed the agreement, effectively ending his part in the civil suit, though Ebony's broader lawsuit against the city for reforms continued. Royce's confession and apology to the Internal Affairs Division sealed his fate. He was officially terminated from the NYPD, stripped of his pension benefits, and faced possible perjury charges for earlier cover-ups. His wife followed through on the divorce, gaining full custody of their children. He was left in a small apartment, jobless, financially drained, and publicly shamed. That was the karma Ebony had foreshadowed, and it was merciless. But Ebony scarcely took satisfaction in his downfall. She'd prefer a world where no one, not even a prejudiced cop, had to be destroyed by the rot of racism. But justice demanded accountability, and accountability was rarely gentle. On the city's end, Ebony's steadfast pursuit of legal and public pressure finally yielded results. The NYPD announced new bias training protocols, improved oversight committees, and the creation of an external watchdog group empowered to investigate citizen complaints without departmental interference. While Ebony knew these measures wouldn't be a magic bullet to fix all issues, she recognized it as a significant step forward, a victory that might save lives and spare people the humiliation she had endured. One late summer evening, Ebony found herself standing on a stage at the grand opening of the Bronx Tech Center, the very charity project she'd supported on that fateful day. Dozens of bright young faces, future coders and entrepreneurs, filled the seats. She gazed upon them with pride, feeling the weight of her journey pressed gently on her shoulders. In the front row sat Richard, beaming with admiration. Beside him, corporate sponsors, community leaders, and teachers looked at Ebony with respect and gratitude. She had come full circle, from a small child in Detroit with big dreams, to a target of racial profiling, to a catalyst for change. Now she was here to open a place where countless youths could nurture their talents without fearing prejudice or limitations. When she took the microphone, her voice was both firm and warm. I stand here today, not as a victim, but as a testament to what happens when we refuse to remain silent in the face of injustice. This center isn't just a building, it's a symbol of empowerment, a bridge from dreams to reality. Let's continue to fight for a world where everyone is seen for who they are, not the stereotypes imposed upon them. Thunderous applause erupted. Ebony blinked against tears, smiling even as emotion coursed through her. She spotted her mother, who had flown in from Detroit, wiping away proud tears, and her grandmother in a wheelchair, grinning through years of wisdom. Later that night, as Ebony and Richard strolled through the luminous streets of Manhattan, hand in hand, they reflected on the journey. That single harrowing incident had ignited a chain of events that tested their strength, rattled the city's institutions, and ushered in new commitments to fairness. They paused beneath the glow of a street lamp. Ebony looked into Richard's eyes, and he in hers, both feeling gratitude that even in the darkest moments, they had each other. I love you, Richard said, his voice soft yet unwavering. Ebony squeezed his hand. I love you too, she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. And we still have a world to change. He chuckled gently, pressing a kiss to her forehead. One step at a time, my brilliant wife. One step at a time. Thank you for following Ebony Caldwell's powerful journey from mistaken thief to a catalyst for change. This story reminds us that racism can strike any day, anywhere, but so can the courage to stand up for what's right. Ebony's willingness to fight for justice, rather than settling for an apology, ensured that her tragedy turned into triumph for countless others. With her billionaire husband's unwavering support, she confronted prejudice head-on and forced meaningful reform. If this narrative moved you, stirred your sense of justice, or simply gave you hope, please show your support. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more inspiring stories and important discussions that matter. Let's spread the message far and wide. No one should ever be judged by their appearance, and change is possible when we unite for what's right. Together, we can make a world of difference, one story at a time.